Good evening, and thank you for attending this webinar about writing instruction. And I am going to share my screen with you so you can see what I'm talking about here. And I will get my slides going here. And so this evening, we're going to be talking about best practices in writing instruction and strategies for writing instruction. And I should say that the source for the material that I'm presenting tonight is based on a program called the Writing Revolution. It's created by Judith Hochman, who has worked in the field of teaching literacy in all its forms to students with dyslexia and dysgraphia, and also to students who have older students who have not had the benefit of writing instruction in their younger years. So we use this program in all three of our divisions at Groves Academy, and find that it is really a wonderful approach to writing instruction, really probably for all students. So what we'll be talking about this evening is, first of all, what is writing? Who is it for? What is it? And what are the challenges that are writing? We'll also be looking at a little bit of the research that we've learned about what what instructional practices work best for students. And I want to, and so having done that, we'll dive into sentence writing strategies, because sentences are the absolute bedrock of writing. And I'll talk about various aspects of teaching sentences and how that works for all ages, how these strategies can be adapted to younger students, middle school students, and older students. We'll also look at our paragraph writing strategy, and the ultimate goal, which of course is to be able to write multi-paragraph essays and so on. But it all starts with the good sentence. So researcher, Steve Graham and Karen Harris, have done a lot of research into writing instruction. What are the best approaches, and so on. And what he's found is that teaching students to write summaries has a very high correlation with reading comprehension, and is one of the better approaches to reading comprehension. So combining writing with reading is really an excellent approach, rather than just simple questions, to actually be able to write about something that you've read. And what I like about the Writing Revolution is it's really a reader's approach to writing, which is what Judy Hochman would tell you if she were here tonight. The other thing that Steve Graham found is that teaching grammar in the way that people learned it when I was in school, in fact, when people a lot younger than I am were in school, actually has a slightly negative effect on reading comprehension. Why would that be? I think probably because, having to think about subjects and verbs and all the other things that we used to do when we would diagram sentences uses up a decent amount of cognitive working space. And writing is a very cognitively complicated activity. So we need to have strategies, but not necessarily so many rules that we have to remember. And I don't know about you, but I used to love doing doing sentence diagramming when I was in junior high school and high school and so on. But when I was writing, it never occurred to me to think about all the things, the ways that were being, about those sentence diagrams, and I do not recommend it now for teaching writing. So if we look at what writing actually is, I mean, it's basically, at its simplest, or at its most basic, it's a transcription process, a way of transcribing oral language into writing. And of course, the ability to do that brought us, has enabled an extraordinary expansion of knowledge, because when you can write things down, people can read them many years later and understand what was happening. So writing, is basically, it's a demonstration of knowledge. It's a communication tool, an important one, and it's also a learning tool, because through being able to express thoughts in writing or express ideas in writing, people actually cement those ideas and that knowledge in themselves, as well as creating something that's more lasting. So the the NAEP, or the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is sometimes called the nation's report card. So in 2011, the NAEP folks explained writing as a complex, multifaceted, and purposeful act of communication accomplished in a variety of environments, under various constraints of time, and with a variety of language resources and technological tools, and which takes in a lot of, covers a lot of ground, because we know that writing, while we think of it as paper and pencil or paper and pen, can certainly be done with the use of technology, word processing, voice recognition, etc. So, and I put the cover of the Writing Revolution down here at the bottom, partly because I wanted to give credit to Judy and her work, but also she has a book called The Writing Revolution, which really covers a lot of the strategies that we're going to be talking about tonight, and is a great resource. And you can get it from Amazon for somewhere around $20 or so, and I really heartily recommend it. They also have a website that is really comprehensive and has a lot of material for free. And if you happen to have a subscription to their resource library, there's endless amounts of videos, templates, and all kinds of resources. So with that in mind, I will move along. So the thing about writing is it allows you to show your knowledge. It tells your knowledge by being able to write it down and show that you know it. But in the process of writing things down, it transforms knowledge, so that in many ways it creates, it allows you to internalize knowledge in a way that you wouldn't if you just read it. So it's an extraordinary tool that humans were not really evolved to do, but have been able to do because of the plasticity of our brains and our ability to read and so on. So writing actually involves cognition and language. So first of all, it takes, we have to have linguistic knowledge. We have to understand how words go together and work together to communicate in a coherent way. Then it also involves world knowledge, because you have to have something to write about. And so your experience in the world, it gives you material about which you can write. It's also an act of social cognition. And this, I think, is extremely important. Writers have to have a sense of their audience. People write ultimately. I mean, yes, people write for themselves, but people write for other people, basically. So you have to think about, when I'm working with students, I'm always asking them, now, who's this for? You can't assume that your audience knows what you're talking about. So think about, who's this for, and write for that audience. And so the combination is, and combining language with cognition is very powerful. And the more that students are made aware of that, the better they will do. So writing includes a fair amount of executive function challenges, and that's in particular with working memory, which is one of our executive functions. And it operates over a very short period of time. It serves as a place to temporarily store information, both information that's incoming and also information that's retrieved that the person already knows. It focuses attention on the information, and it manipulates it in order to allow a person to then come up with an answer, or to write, or whatever. So in writing, planning is absolutely crucial. Sequencing information so that it makes sense is also key, and organization of that information in a form that can be understood by others. And that's a major challenge. So you'll find that all the various people would have that have maybe appear differently have difficulty with writing. Some because they have issues with language, like in dyslexia, or and specifically writing, like dysgraphia. On the other hand, there are also people who have great oral language and can express themselves very well, and they can read, but to actually take information, plan what to say, put it in a sequence, organize it so that it comes out in the form of sentences and paragraphs and so on, is extremely difficult. So it's very important with a writing program that there be elements of to support students with executive function challenges. Because the other thing that happens in writing is that there's a lot of competition. We only have so much cognitive bandwidth that we have to work with, what we might call cognitive workspace. And when you're writing, you have to come up with the words, you have to spell things, you've got grammar rules that have to be recalled, and so on. And then there are the concepts, the higher order concepts that need to be expressed. And so if spelling and grammar rules and all the sort of lower order things that people have to do when they write, if those aren't automatic, then most of the bandwidth is going to be taken up with getting through spelling words, trying to figure out punctuation, capitalism, and all those kinds of more administrative type tasks, and the concepts lose. So you'll often see students who they're certainly bright enough, they have great oral language and vocabulary, but they have so many challenges with with some of the, the spelling and grammar and so on, that they just basically dumb down what they say because it's just so hard to get through, all of that process. So planning and organization and other supports will really help this. So we have to focus on really what we want to say and what the goal is in the audience and so on, before we start actually drafting or writing a full sentence, paragraph, etc. So things like handwriting, keyboarding, spelling, capitalization, punctuation, word usage, and so on, those need to be as automatic as possible so you don't have to think about them when you're writing. And for those who have handwriting and keyboarding challenges and spelling, sometimes voice recognition will be useful, assistive technology. Regardless, we have to pay attention to planning and organizing, because we have to think about, what our purpose is, what the audience is, and what the meaning, what is the message that we want that we want to convey. So those things have to be really carefully considered, and some of these things over here barriers can be broken down with certain modifications or accommodations and so on. So when we talk about barriers, which we have been talking about a little bit, certainly organizational skills get in the way. And then as well as, but the other thing too is being able to see another's point of view. In other words, having empathy. When you're writing, when you're writing for an audience, it's important to think about what's the point of view that your audience has, or what is the point of view of the person of the author who's writing something that you're writing about. You have to be able to tell the difference between what's more essential and less important information to put in your writing. You need to draw upon your background knowledge in words, vocabulary, knowledge, etc. You have to be able to sustain effort and attention, which is focus and executive function issue, and then also the syntax and the grammar, which can certainly, again, which can put up a barrier to good writing. So all of these things are potentially problematic, but they don't have to be if we can plan, organize, and scaffold the instruction to help students become independent writers. So if you think about assignments that require you to write for an audience, I know it's really popular and very common for teachers to have students write journals. But a journal, and I'm not saying that's not a worthy thing to do, but journals are written for oneself. So if you want to structure assignments that require students to think about their audience and what they want to communicate to their audience and so on, then writing newspaper articles, writing letters, writing interviews, writing reviews of things, summarizing, those are things that, those are writing assignments that are going to enable students to write for the outside world or an audience outside of themselves, which is the communication part of writing. And so, what instead of just having like, okay, writing as this is writing, we're going to do this for 45 minutes, and that's what we're going to do, and that's going to be the beginning and end of writing instruction. Better to embed writing in all instruction, because it's going to result in better sentences. It's going to improve organizational skills with practice. It's going to improve reading comprehension. And embedding writing in all areas of instruction is going to stretch instruction across an entire day, and like the saying says, practice makes perfect. So it's really important to really focus on writing. And there's lots of things that certainly social studies, history, the social sciences are a great place for writing assignments, but so is science, and even math can be can be a good source for writing, because we have to express the result of problems and so on. So anyway, let's talk about sentences. I will stop at some point. If you have questions, send them on to, put them in the chat, and Joanna will let me know if we have some questions that I can answer. I think I'll start sentences and then take some questions. So the point of sentence activities is to raise the level of linguistic complexity and the clarity in the sentence. By also enhance revision and editing skills and improve reading comprehension. So everything that's written improves reading comprehension, basically. So, okay, so we'll talk about here some beginning sentence strategies, okay? First of all, there's the strategy of teaching fragments versus complete sentences, teaching sentence types, teaching coordinating conjunctions that, but grouped together, create a wonderful opportunity for critical thinking on the part of students. Subordinating conjunctions of positives, sentence combining, sentence expansion, those are all great. Now, one of the things that I've always felt, and it's really nice that Judy Hockman agrees with me, is when you're especially if you're talking to young children, you don't have to use all the terminology that such as nouns and predicates and prepositional phrases, adverbial clauses, etc. You really don't have to do that. For young children, you can talk about who and did what for a noun and verb sentence pattern. And then you can use question words to get responses in sentence expansion. Who did what, when, where, how, why. So they don't need to know all the terminology in order to write a good sentence. So you want to have, definitely what you want to have is the conceptual knowledge of the basic sentence parts that will allow them to, to monitor the sentences that they hear, read, and speak, and write, and so on. But it doesn't have to be in the form of fancy, linguistic terms and things. Now, obviously, if students are older and maybe exposed to these phrases or need to know them for whatever reason, certainly, I'm not saying you can't use them, but I don't personally find it that useful for introducing sentences and in fact in revising them, because sometimes the terminology gets in the way. So fragments, this is a great way to begin for all ages. Fragments, identifying sentence fragments helps a student to know what is or isn't a sentence. It also helps them label who or what of a sentence, or what who or what is doing. So if you look at, like, for example, the chirping birds, what are the chirping birds doing? Shuts the lid. Who shuts the lid? A box of shells. What? You know, where does that box of shells come from? Is there somebody holding it, etc.? And then walked. Who walked? Where? So fragments often come from a book or an article read by the student. So then, you know, then it's kind of a buy one get one, because by looking for fragments versus sentences is to compare and contrast between a fragment and a complete sentence. It also can be a check for comprehension. And I've used this a lot with in literature, using phrases right from a story that students have been reading, and they are able to ask themselves who or what did what, you know, and so on. So here's an example in a social studies lesson. Here, this is maybe an article about the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the Puritans and so on. So you can, by putting asking students to recognize fragments versus complete sentences, then they have to repair them. So, you know, if we have a fragment that says faced many hardships, who? The Puritans, okay. William Penn, what about him? Founded Pennsylvania. Massachusetts Bay Colony, what? You know, so these are all fragments that can be given as a worksheet. It can be given as, you know, they can be given as an exit ticket. Lots of good opportunities for students to, because the student has to know something in order to repair these fragments, and that's a great thing. But we're not asking them to write a ton of stuff. We're just asking them to recognize and repair. Then you can also use prepositional phrases, which you don't have to call prepositional phrases. So, you know, there's into the boat on the ship during the 1600s. And then students, again, have to recognize there's no who there, or there's no what. There's no did what. And these have to be repaired, and knowledge is needed to repair them. So it's a great activity, and I do it as an introduction to sentence writing, and I also return to it frequently, because I don't want students forgetting or dropping off the idea that a complete sentence has to have a who or what and a did what, as well as, you know, at the very basic level. So, and again, here's another example. There's just even a picture. This is someone's idea of the original Thanksgiving, which we can all kind of criticize right now, but nonetheless, looking at that picture, here again, which one is a complete sentence and what are fragments? Well, you know, ate a great meal doesn't tell who. An important holiday doesn't explain what it is. The family gathers together. Yes. Who? The family. Did what? Gathers. You know, and so on. So these are all terrific examples. You can also embed fragments in paragraphs, so that students are reading a paragraph and they have to find the fragments. So that actually is an incentive for students to read closely. Close reading is a great thing. Find the fragments and fix it. And then there's teaching sentence types, which I think is also useful. Why? Why do we need to know different sentence types? Well, if we write absolutely every sentence as a statement, it gets boring. So using different sentence types will vary our sentences, and it actually gives us a way to write a topic or concluding sentence. So like if you look down here, which sentence is more interesting? This is all about Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is celebrated by all Americans. Okay, Thanksgiving is the best holiday. Tell us why. Do you know how the tradition of Thanksgiving began? Or come and celebrate Thanksgiving with my family. So there's a statement, there's an exclamation, there's a question, and there's a command. So which one is more interesting? Depending on your paragraph, you might want to use something other than just the statement. Thanksgiving is celebrated by all Americans. Well, tell me something I don't know. So the 4 sentence types, again, declarative or statement, question, exclamatory, imperative. And those are, kids pick those up, students pick these up pretty easily, but the question is, can they use them in the right places? So we want to basically following an article based on an article about immigration, then we want them to use a different sentence type about each topic. So write a question about immigrants based on the article that you read. Write a statement about Ellis Island. Write an exclamation about freedom. And then acclimate question. How do immigrants acclimate to their new surroundings, etc. So, and of course I look at freedom and I think of me and Bobby McGee. Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose, exclamation point. So we want to give them plenty of opportunities to practice these so that they, when we get into paragraph writing, we can impress upon students how important it is to have an interesting topic sentence. You can also use scrambled sentences. Now, I don't do this with every group. Some students find that scrambled sentences really stress them. One way that I can make it a little easier is to put the first sentence in bold and capitalize it. So, then it's pretty much easier. A little more difficult is a longer sentence and I bold the first word, though I do not capitalize it. And then of course, there's no clues at all, no scaffolds at all. They just have to figure it out. So these are also, I don't do a lot of this, but it can be a useful tool. Developing questions is really an important activity. So one of the things that, one way to do that is just to show a picture and then give the answer. Okay, so basically the student would get the picture and the answer would be fractions. So then the student has to come up with the question, what is the girl learning about? Yeah, okay. And that's, being able to phrase questions is actually, linguistically, it's much more challenging than doing a statement, writing a statement. And then again, this is a really nice activity too. Write 3 questions about the picture. If you are, this is obviously a cave painting here, so perhaps this is a study in prehistoric life somewhere, and then ask the students to come up with questions. That is a way of kind of a way of, of generating their interest in the topic by having to write a question. And students do well with pictures to think about, use their imagination and so on. Then too, you can also use questions. You can use the answer and the question to test knowledge. So what's something, if the answer is George Washington and you're studying about in American history, then what are you going to, what are you going to ask? Well, who was the first president of the United States? Abraham, George Washington, and so on. Where's the White House? So on. Again, a different way and a more interesting and engaging way in checking for knowledge. Who was the first president? Yes. Who was the president during the Civil War? What is the address of the White House? There you go. And now we come to one of my very most favorite strategies for teaching sentences. And this is where we start to get into sentence expansion, because we are teaching now basic conjunctions. And what's great about because, but, and so is that you can use them with the starter of the sentence. You can use them with the same starter and get a very different answer. Because, of course, tells why, but is a change of direction. It moves in a different direction than you might expect from the beginning of the sentence. And so is a great way to express cause and effect. And I'll show you in subsequent slides what we're talking about here. So again, we are moving toward more advanced, more complex sentences. And so here we have change of direction. This is but, okay. So these are from Charlotte's Web. And here you see we have but. Wilbur was doomed to death, but Fern saved him. And then there are lots of other ways of, eventually leading to, although, while, however, in contrast, but is the beginning of being able to move to these slightly more sophisticated terms that express change of direction. And here are the kinds of assignments that you do. We pick what we call a kernel sentence. The teacher was happy. Now that can stand on its own. So you can actually contrast. This kernel sentence using because, but, and so. The teacher was happy because today, because today was her birthday. The teacher was happy, but she had to work before she could celebrate. The teacher was happy, so she was very kind to all her students that day. So you see, and again, Thanksgiving is an important holiday because it represented, the successful year of the Pilgrims' settlement in Plymouth. Thanksgiving is an important holiday, but we don't spend enough time learning about the Native Americans who were displaced by the, by the settlers. Thanksgiving is an important holiday, so it is a federal holiday that we can celebrate. So again, this is really nice by using these conjunctions with the same kernel sentence. Really brings out some interesting contrasts. Alexander Hamilton is admired because he was the first Treasury Secretary of the nation. Alexander Hamilton is admired, but he impulsively got himself shot in a duel. Alexander Hamilton is admired, so we put him on the $20 bill or $10 bill or whatever bill he happens to be on. Anyway, so it causes a lot of extra thought that you wouldn't expect just by using these same conjunctions. And I just love this strategy. It's just the best. And here again, you can imagine Columbus wanted to find a new route to the Indies, but he ran into North America instead. He wanted to find because he wanted an easier way to trade with Asia, so etc. You can see, and here's a math example. Fractions are like decimals because they are and so on. So this is so it's a very, very useful strategy. And in geometry, here we go still. And this is, this is fairly complex, a square is on, and so you have to be careful with that. You're actually using it as a cause and effect. So, as a result of, if you could substitute as a result, the square is always a rectangle. As a result, you can use the same formula to find the area of each shape. And that's the correct use of so there. And that can be tricky. So one of the things that we always want to do is when you create these activities is to anticipate a response, just to make sure that you know what you're looking for. Because believe me, it is so easy to create activities and then be there in your class and realize, you know what, that doesn't really work. And now here I am teaching students, and I look like kind of this isn't what I thought I was doing. Here you can also shorten things, as students get older and more advanced and so on. You can use it as a you can use it as almost as a vocabulary sort of thing. Something about school. I like school because I like school, but I wish it ended earlier in the day. I like school so I can learn, etc. And here's a vocabulary application here, which is, another great way to use this particular strategy. So then we move on to sentence combining, which is the next area really that we get to when we're in our study of sentences. Sentence combining is a very well researched strategy that is widely accepted as a really great strategy. And again, forces students to consolidate words and to create better sentences as a result. It actually, what it does, it improves grammar, but particularly it improves understanding of word order. And it gives us some flexibility with our sentences. So, a simple beginning is Mr. Perpich has a positive, Brian has, so then you can combine the subject. Mr. Perpich and Brian have positive attitudes. And again, that forces, them to combine the nouns, but then also we have to change, attitude to attitudes, which is, again, a grammatical understanding that shows. And then sentence combining can be we can certainly use the because, but, so strategy for combining sentences. Like, for example, How to Eat Fried Worms was a good movie, the book was better. What conjunction are we going to use here? I think that probably needs a but. How to Eat Fried Worms. It was a good movie. I told my friends to see it. What conjunction should we use there to combine those sentences? Well, that seems to be a so, because as a result, I told my friends. Then third was a good movie. It had many great characters and scenes. That's a because. So this is another way to help students decide what conjunction goes in what place and why. So gradually, as students learn how to combine sentences, we can begin to expand the number of sentences that can be combined. And here we have 5 different sentences that we've now gotten down to 1. This is a great intro to revision, which involves sometimes combining sentences and and phrasing things in a more writerly way. The sentence expansion, it basically is really helpful. It gives us more information to the reader, and it's also, we have to help students learn to write like a writer and not just like we would, that there's a difference between oral language and writing. That oral language is much more informal, but writing has certain conventions that writers use, and we want our students to know how to do that so that they can write with somewhat more formally without being stilted. Here, the key to this is you want to start with a kernel, a very simple active declarative sentence. Only one verb, no modifiers. So snow fell, cells divide, they fought, whatever. And then you can use question words. And that's then how you can begin to expand a sentence. And I think it's following Judith Hochman's advice, I start with when and where, because it's easy. It snowed. When? Saturday. Where? In Edina. Now, if I were just telling somebody that it snowed Saturday in Edina, but in written form, we want to start with when, because it's just a more advanced strategy. Saturday, it snowed in Edina, or in Edina, it snowed on Saturday. Personally, I like Saturday, it snowed in Edina. The reason you want to teach students to start their modifiers first is that when students have to take high stakes tests and they have to take writing exams and so on, if you start a sentence with when or where, it gets a whole lot more points than if you do it then writing it as if you were speaking it. And this is kind of what we're trying to convey to students, is that speaking and writing are 2 different forms of communication, and so we have to treat them a little differently. And here's another example. Gradually, we can take our kernel sentence and we can ask for more question words. This is a great way to teach sentence expansion. So using those question words. And I find it just works beautifully. And again, teaching when and where, and then adding in because. So adding the conjunction. So for a simple sentence, teaching I went to the library when, after school. Let's see, when. Well, actually, this is both when, so this should be when. But anyway, after school on Tuesday, I went to the library, and that's fine. But then we can add the because I needed to find a book about epigenetics. See, I should have anticipated here, because where is really not, is already in there. Okay, moving on. So if you're going to expand sentences with who, use a pronoun, not a name, okay? So if you want to have them, they were devastated, then they have to name who, where in Los Angeles, why, and here comes because of losses in the industry. Residents, and then we have residents of Louisiana, not they, were devastated because of losses in the fishing industry, their food supply, and the general economy. So this is, so then we start this actually with just sort of some notes here, and then once that's planned, then the whole sentence can be written, and it's beautiful. Here's another example. And again, requires knowledge that the student probably has read about or studied, and this gives them an opportunity to use their writing skills to summarize it. And if asking who or what, use the pronoun they, he, it, etc. Because you want them to have to search for it. You want them to find that. And I think here, I'm going to stop right here and see if we have questions. And Joanna, if you're out there, do we have any questions coming in?
We don't have any at the moment. We had a few problems about the slides, but yeah, so if anybody out there has questions, please submit them and we'll answer your questions for you.
Right, okay. Terrific. So as we move through the sentence, we're getting now into complex sentences, compound complex sentences. When we start adding a subordinating conjunction, it is considered more sophisticated. It's rated higher on writing assessments. So the subordinating conjunction can be just simply a phrase like after school, we do our homework, or before, and here we start to put in before school begins. And here we're now moving into a subordinate clause as opposed to just a conjunction. As soon as school starts, we go to the classroom when school is over. So here now, we've really actually moved into a complex sentence where we have a subordinate clause and an independent clause. So that's to use more formal grammatical terms. So basically, practicing subordinating conjunctions really just ups the ante in terms of linguistic complexity. And, and it's a way of varying sentences so that we might expand sentences with a conjunction, but we may begin sentences with a subordinate conjunction or a subordinate clause. That works very well when we're writing a topic or a concluding sentence in a paragraph or in a thesis statement. And the other thing is that we're writing in a more sophisticated writing style, but by being able to use these different linguistic patterns in sentences, we're also learning how to read them too. And one of the things that research has shown us is that students who have maybe have not been able, have had to have remediation and decoding and spelling and so on. Even when they're well remediated, if they haven't done a lot of reading because of their because of the barriers they have to decoding and so on, and even if they have capability of good comprehension, they don't always understand as well or comprehend more more academic type writing, which tends to use more complicated linguistic patterns in sentences, in long sentences, and so on. So by writing these sentences, we're helping them to understand how sentences work, how meaning is derived from the sentences, and it makes them a better reader, which is absolutely one of the goals. And so,
Ellen, we did have a question pop up.
Good.
So this one is from Jenna, and it says, at the beginning of the session, Ellen mentioned that students can have normal oral and reading skills, but are overwhelmed and struggle with writing. If our student fits this description and we wanted to get them assistance with this difficulty, what are some of the terms, nomenclature, disabilities we should research?
Well, I think when you're when students are overwhelmed and their output is low, despite the fact that they have good oral vocabulary and so on, and good oral language, it's usually an executive function issue. So, and this that's kind of a symptom of a student's challenge in planning and organization too. And usually with unless the student is so traumatized by not being able to write, that becomes an anxiety issue. But one of the things that really helps that is working with the student to actually help that student understand sentence structure, begin writing it, again, with a lot of scaffolding, as you see here, that students are being basically led through gradual stages in their ability to write increasingly more complicated sentences. And as you see here, we're designing activities just like here. Let's say somebody, students have read Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs. And now this is a writing activity where the subordinating conjunction is given, and the student needs to complete the sentence. So this is a scaffolded activity. Now, eventually, we're gonna work up to the fact that the student will be independent, as all of these things do, and that will be, and that will improve and lessen his anxiety, his or her anxiety, their anxiety over producing sentences or writing paragraphs, etc. So, but it takes practice. It needs to be steady and it needs to be consistent. Okay. The other thing, which I hope that helps, but generally, that's where it's really more of an executive function or issue, and anxiety can be produced as a result of it. But again, if I've seen students with all of those difficulties, just that whole difficulty with bringing thoughts to writing, do very well with this approach to teaching writing. It's safe, it's scaffolded, and it's related to stuff that they're reading, so they don't necessarily have to come up with something, out of the blue. And a positive, people hear the term a positive and they think, what are you talking about? But a positive is simply a second noun or a phrase that's placed before the first noun to explain it. So, for example, here's a J.K. Rowling from Harry Potter. Once they were in her office, comma, a small room with a large welcoming fire, comma, Professor McGonagall motioned to Harry and Hermione to sit down. So it's a way of adding a little bit of extra information right there within the sentence. Oftentimes, it's simply like the author, comma, J.K. Rowling, comma, tells us that Harry and Hermione went to Professor McGonagall's office or something like that. And again, this is an easy thing to do, to bring meaning, and it's oftentimes but it's also a very sophisticated kind of writing approach or writing structure. And when you use it, that's a very, we don't talk like that particularly. We don't talk in, we would not orally say the sentence that's here written down, because it just isn't natural for oral language, but it is extremely helpful for written language, and is rated such on, high stakes exams, etc. And again, it's a way of giving more information to the reader. It varies sentences, and again, by writing it, it helps make us better readers when we come across it in our reading, which we will do because it's used often in amongst writers. And here you see things like Washington, the capital of the United States, or writing, the most difficult skill to teach and to learn, is required in school and the workplace. So those are examples of appositives. You can also approach this again with, you can give it like a kind of a bank of phrases here, and students can match each one to the to the sentence. So election day, and here, which is going to be November 4th, 2006. I think this comes back. This is probably an older. Anyway, Paul Ryan, a Republican, is Speaker of the House, or at least he was then. And Friday, January 20th, Inauguration Day. Democrats, represented by a donkey, are one of two, so anyway, that gives them some choices, and helps again, so that they're not actually having to write it right away, but they're beginning to understand why it's there and where an appositive would be placed. And I think we have already done subordinating conjunctions, but here they are, too. So in terms of creating sentence activities, you can make fragments. They can be subjects, they can be predicates or verbs or action words, or they can be prepositional phrases, but not a subject and a verb. Because once you have a subject and a verb, that is a kernel, okay? So when you're doing a because, but, so activity, the kernels have to work with all three conjunctions, and the kernels must be identical. So you got to be careful when you're forming those, that it works, that your kernel will work with all three conjunctions, because, but, and so. The kernel sentences should be bare bones in order for sentence expansion practice. Then question words for sentence expansion can only be words that are not addressed in the kernel. So if you write, for example, if you write, if your kernel is President Biden spoke, and then you say who, well, I mean, it's there in the kernel, it's President Biden. So he spoke, and then, then you need to, then they can figure out who you're talking about, and so on. So you use a pronoun rather than naming who or whatever. And the other thing is, and this is, it's a pain, but it really is important to create an anticipated response for the activities that you make, so that you're sure that they work. And I end up having to write a lot of writing lesson plans for teachers, substitutes, new teachers, modeling, etc. And so I have gotten incredibly used to writing anticipated responses, because sometimes if a substitute is in a classroom, they don't know what I'm thinking if I for the answer. So I need to make sure that they know what to expect for the student to write, and so on. So it's good for us. It's good for us to do our own work and make sure it actually works. Okay, so now we're going on to paragraphs. Do we have any other questions before I launch into paragraphs?
Nothing yet.
Okay, then here we go. So the writing revolution has an absolutely wonderful template to help plan paragraphs and organize paragraphs. And it's called a single paragraph outline, or as we say, an SPO. So what the single paragraph outline does is it helps us to plan before writing the paragraph, and that's crucial. It helps you to organize and sequence information, focuses on what's important, most important, less important, or not important at all, and helps us to stay on the topic and think about, understand, and remember what we're learning. So doing a single paragraph outline in some cases can be a way of taking notes, actually. And not all single paragraph outlines have to be turned into fully written paragraphs either. So and here is basically, this is a picture. I'm not sure it's the greatest, but here is what's kind of cool about it is that there are full lines for topic sentence. When you see a full line, that means a complete sentence has to be on it. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, these are the details that would support the topic sentence. And and there are dotted lines here. When there's a dotted line, you do not write a complete sentence. Instead, you write notes, keywords, phrases, and you may use some abbreviations as well. And then down here is the concluding sentence. But by doing this, you are, by doing it this way, you're able to play around and not, before you actually start writing something out, with exactly what your topic is going to be and what details are going to follow. So the topic sentence can easily be, you can start with a topic sentence, or you can develop it after the important details are established. And you don't have to have a concluding sentence. Not all paragraphs need a concluding sentence. So, following along, the steps in writing, you have to plan That's good for your outline. You draft your writing or your paragraph. You revise and edit it, and then you can write the final copy. So most of this really can be done on the single paragraph outline, so that by the time you get to the final copy, you are just ready to go, whether you type it or write it. So you plan a paragraph and we think, okay, we're going to write a paragraph about global warming. And what's our audience? Well, fifth graders at GROWS. We want to let fifth graders at GROWS know about global warming. And in particular, our purpose is to explain the effects of global warming on penguins. Okay, so that's, we have a topic, we have an audience, and then we have a purpose for writing. Very important. And so, you select your topic, and then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to brainstorm, and then you're going to categorize. Then you can select the details and go on put on the single paragraph outline. And then you can write a concluding sentence if in fact you need one. And that's the planning. So I oftentimes will start with students. First of all, I'll do it with them many times, modeling, and they follow along. And I will give them the topic sentence. I'll give them a single paragraph outline that's partially complete. It has a topic sentence. And then they practice like completing completing the single paragraph outline. So there might be so they might write details, that supporting details that fit with the topic sentence, or I might give them the supporting details and they write a topic sentence. Writing topic sentences, of course, is a challenge for students, and they need and they need support. They need help, So we might, there are all sorts of ways that you can do a partially complete single paragraph outline that scaffolds the activity so that students are not stuck having to think everything up. They get a lot of practice with, and of course, we're usually doing it too, not always, but often doing it based on something that they've read. So they have some background knowledge, and we can then work with what's the topic? What do you want to write? What are we going to be writing about? And what are the supporting details? Okay. And so on. So then you can also, this is another great activity, is to give them sentences here. And they need to figure out which one of these would be the best topic sentence. And what has and then find the sentence that has the weakest connection to the topic sentence. So, so then we look at this, and number 5, would be probably a good topic sentence. And then what would be the weakest? Probably the one about she's sent to work in the fields, because that doesn't have a strong connection to becoming an armed scout and spy for the Union Army. Okay. Or we might decide that Harriet Tubman was an extraordinary woman. That's a general, and perhaps that's a topic sentence. In any event, they get a chance to make that decision and to figure out what is less important here, and that's hard for students. So we want to do that. Here's another example. Which one is the topic sentence, and then what what would the sequence be here? And so working on topic and concluding sentences is it takes some work. We don't have a lot of time here, but I want to talk about, go to, multi-paragraph outlines. Okay, so as you build these single paragraph outline, these skills, you want to just develop the concept of a topic and a concluding sentence by doing all kinds of prep work, distinguishing a main idea from supporting details, match details with topic sentences, eliminate the least relevant sentence. You can teach students to use abbreviations on the single paragraph outline. You can use 3 different strategies for developing the topic and concluding sentences. Usually at the beginning, we're starting with what kind of a sentence do you want to use? Do you want to have your topic sentence be a statement or a question? And then you can turn the, you can also give them a paragraph or a sentence and ask them to turn it into notes, but that's a pretty sophisticated thing. Working on these items first will be a good way to begin. Summarizing is really important, and you can, so writing summaries or notes or answering a question, written summaries are going to probably be a very important way to develop reading comprehension. Here is a way to simply use a summary sentence, which is actually an extremely good activity for students to really, really consolidate their language, and again, using question words to develop the ideas, which then very easily lead to a good summary sentence. I use this a lot, and it's great for summarizing news articles and things like that as well. When you do multi-paragraph outlines, then you're essentially taking all of the paragraph skills that you've taught and moving it to more than one. What they'll have to do is practice transitioning between paragraphs so that the essay has flow, categorizing details, writing broad topic sentences and concluding sentences. And let's see, and here would be like an example of how you might start. This would be 2 to 3 paragraphs here, and the topic could be pros and cons of cell phone. So 1 paragraph would be about the pros, 1 paragraph would be about the cons, and then there might be a concluding sentence. And then the multi-paragraph outline is when we are really getting into higher level essay writing. Here's the classic 5-paragraph essay, I suppose, but here we're looking at the topic, and then we have a thesis statement. And I'm not going to get incredibly into very far into writing a thesis statement because we don't have time. But I wanted to show you this as a way of scaffolding a longer essay that for high school teachers and some middle school teachers and some classes and so on it is an extremely helpful way to get students to organize what they're doing. Now it is 8:22 and I want to can talk a little bit about revising, but I'm thinking, again, do we still have an audience, and do they have any questions? This is a lot of material, and I understand that.
Yeah, we still have about 20 people, but yeah, no more questions have popped up, so.
Okay, great. Well, revising is a absolutely key activity for sentence writing, paragraph writing, essay writing, whatever. And so this is an opportunity here for students to go back, add words, delete unnecessary words, substitute words, phrases, rearranging, proofreading, and so on. You want, in giving explicit feedback for revising, what can be perhaps revising topic sentences, varying vocabulary. Students need to learn they can't use the same word over and over. Transitions, usually from one paragraph to another, sometimes even from one sentence. Now, one of the things that I like to do is to give my students what we call an unelaborated paragraph. In other words, a really basic paragraph, and then give them directions for how to improve it. So we want to have explicit directions. Okay, so here's an example. Eleanor Roosevelt was important. She was married to Franklin Roosevelt. She was the first lady. She made many contributions. Many people admired her. Great paragraph, not particularly. So we want to think about, we want to improve the topic sentence and the concluding sentence. Eleanor Roosevelt was important. Why? Here comes because, okay. Expand sentences, then combine sentences. She was married to Franklin Roosevelt, so she was the first lady, and then also we have to think if she made contributions, we need some more examples, and we could, vary the sentence, use in a positive, and so on. So explicit feedback would be things like this: improve the topic sentence, expand, which means add more information, who, what, using the question words, elaborate, add examples, add a transitional word and positive, combine sentences, then there's spelling and grammatical errors and vary vocabulary. A highly scaffolded, unelaborated paragraph would be something like this. So we might say, sentence one, improve the topic sentence by answering what. Beneath his hair represents it. What? Add a positive for a guy. Answer what and why. And so you see, these very specific directions, and that's kind of how you start, basically. And again, this is kind of a private try it there. So generally, you start with revising an unelaborated paragraph as a class. You put it up on the board and the kids suggest improvements. They may work in pairs to improve a paragraph with specific directions. They might work to improve a paragraph without directions, and they improve their own work. So you're gradually modeling how to improve, and you do it regularly so that you can get to the point where they can improve their own work with specific directions. And that'll take a while because it's practice. So with that, I hope I would strongly recommend to you once again that if you're interested in this sort of writing instruction, that you look into The Writing Revolution by Judith Hochman, and that you visit their website where you'll find more information. And I wish you luck, because writing instruction, teaching students to write well is a true joy. So thank you.
Ellen, looks like we did have one more question pop up.
Sure.
Just wondering about favorite resources that you'd recommend to help with these topics. I know you mentioned the Writing Revolution, but would you have any others?
Well, the thing is, this is, you kind of have to start and try it. I mean, the resources that I would say, you're basically going to take what's in your curriculum and start writing about it, so that when I teach, when I'm teaching like a novel or something, I'm teaching writing the whole time I'm teaching the novel. So that if I'm teaching a history lesson, I'm teaching writing, and I'm checking for critical thinking and for comprehension by using writing activities such as these. So there is a great Stephen Graham. Stephen Graham is a researcher on writing, and he's done a lot of stuff on, written a lot on best strategies, best practices for teaching writing. So that would be another resource that you could use. I favor pretty significantly Scaffolded, starting to teach writing with a lot of supports for students, because it's scary for them, and a lot of them hate writing. And to gradually pull away and as they get more independent. I'm not a fan of really unstructured, the so-called writing workshop type approach to teaching writing, because in my experience, I can't think of a single student who wouldn't, type of student, including very bright students, who wouldn't benefit from this sort of instruction. So, and I guess that's my recommendation.
Sounds good. Well, that was all the questions we had.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much. I know this was a lot of material, but I wish you luck.
All right. And again, I did share Ellen's slides in the chat, so make sure you get that. And we will share the link to the recording as well. So look at that email that you'll receive tomorrow evening from me. And again, if you're an educator, just reply to that email and I will get you those credits if you are interested in that as well. Thank you everybody so much for attending, and have a great night.